Do you want to top 8 the next Axion Mega Modern?
Well, Team Child Magic are here to help us find out.
This week on battlechads.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Battlechads. My name is Dan and I am joined by one of my co-hosts, Sam. How are we, Sam?
Yeah, very good, but not feeling as good as our guests are at the moment. Do you want to introduce those, Dan?
Yeah, so we've got George and we have Jack. Jack being the team captain and George being team brute, who's recently both done really well over on Axion Mega Modern, playing Grixis Reanimator. Lads, how are we?
Yeah, do well.
Good, cheers, Chief.
So yeah, today we're going to be going through a bit about Grixis Reanimator, which you can see on screen, the deck choice and how we got to it, some of the slots in the sideboard, and just sort of the general feel of the modern format.
Sounds good. You said we there. Did you play Grixis Reanimator at Cardiff, Dan?
No, but I wish I did. The deck looks fun. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, you play Living End, right? So you just played Mega Reanimator instead.
Yeah, big Reanimator. Yeah, that's right.
Big Reanimator. I like it. So, okay, guys, let's rip this Band-Aid off. Jack, how was your weekend? How did the event go?
Event went fantastically. I finished 7-1 in Swiss, so top 8 at it, and then completely bombed out in the quarterfinals. But what I went there to do, which was top 8 and get the slot for the invitational.
Yeah, it was really funny because I was in our LGS for F&M, but I was a bit early, and then Jack just turned up, waiting for his lift, and he was just like, "Yeah, this is my last chance to get invitational. I'm just gonna give it a go, see what happens." Next thing you know, checking in, top 8. So really good result. and not to take away at all from George, how was your weekend?
Yeah, it was not bad, lads. I started 1 and 2, and I ground it out to a 5 and 3. So I will take it. Some vital points for the good old leaderboard, which is looking hella competitive. And I thought my nice easy breeze through at London to lock the slot is definitely out the window. But no, really enjoyable weekend with this list and working on it with Jack for sort of the 10 days before it.
Yeah, and I know Jack top 8 to George, but this is your like third 5-3 this year, or like something silly like that, really consistent.
I think it's if I've done the maths right, it's my 7th 5-3 or better finish in a row without qualifying or top 8ing. So it's a bittersweet one, but yeah, consistency's there. So that's the main thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that you know, it's really cool to be able to say, hey, I do well at all of these events rather than just crashing out in the quarterfinals. So there's a bit of a clarity there. So you guys hit upon a really important point that you worked on this list together for this Mega Modern. I was actually involved in a little bit of discussion. All of my opinions were wrong, which is fantastic to hear in hindsight. But yeah, are you able to talk us through a little bit of the process? Because what's important, I think, here is that you're both known for your decks, essentially. If you're playing against Jack, you're probably going to be playing Boros Energy. And, you know, George, you're a fan of combo piles in general, Living End and such, but you've really been liking Brood Scale recently. So how did you guys end up here?
So obviously the big highlight and the big headline is obviously the deck won the Showcase Challenge the weekend before Axion. Ellie MTG, who is a proper Reanimator Blue-Black X deck aficionado across multiple different formats. If he brings something like this and puts a result up, people are likely going to follow it. But not only that, he then 24 hours later, he won the Sunday Challenge the day after going unbeaten. So instantly, you know, it flagged that for us straight away. It's a super linear deck. It's got a good energy matchup, and like we'll go over in a little bit. As long as we can avoid blink for the most part, it's got a pretty good position in the meta overall. So it was instant green flag for me and Jack.
Yeah, I mean, I've spent most of this modern season, to be fair, with a bit of an identity crisis of I've weirdly fallen out of love with energy.
Hmm.
And then the stars aligned for this deck, and it was just did well online. And everyone I spoke to about it was really talking it down, saying it's like a flash in the pan, which just weirdly made it more tempting because no one was respecting it.
Yeah,
They've continued to not respect it and continue to put up results.
Yeah, I think that like honestly, no slight. I was one of those doubters. I'm a professional hater by trade, but I just like it feels like Modern should be able to interact with an A+B Reanimator deck, right? Like we're in 2025, we've had 3 Bond Horizon sets, each of which does something silly. Urza's Starga is starting to be on the upswing again due to like rules changes and stuff, and like, you know, main deck graveyard hate. Go grab it off your Urza's Starga, and it just, this deck doesn't even care really because it's so efficient, so linear. If you're trying to interact on turn 3 or 4, it's just, would you guys say it's too late by that point?
Yeah, it definitely can be. You know, you're talking to somebody who's spent his entire modern career playing around graveyard hate with various different archetypes. Yeah, I mean, you know, me and Jack were just talking before we started the pod. We both had turns of thought seizing ourselves on turn 1 into a turn 2 reanimate. You know, by that time it could well be too late. So yeah, it's just simply not quick enough, which is grand, and that's exactly why this deck's doing well.
Yeah, the deck looks fun. It gives me a lot of vibes of the Legacy Reanimator, obviously outside of like Force and Will and Days, where you've got like Jack, like we had said about Waddle Lines, where you cycle your troll, go get your second land, and persist it, and then you're just attacking for a load of damage following turns. So I really like it.
Yeah, it's also quite a funny deck in terms of like you can really put your opponent in awkward spots because they're so terrified of so many cards in the deck. Like Psychic Frog, one of the scariest cards in Modern.
Oh yeah,
that eats a Fatal Push. You then play an Emperor of Bones, which is then even scarier in this deck. You can put people in just weird spots of like they want to kill everything but have to pick what they're fighting.
Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah, I think I actually love that aspect of the deck because, you know, I play Belcher in Modern to the surprise of no one. And one thing I thought on paper is I can counter all of these threats. This should be an easy matchup. And then you start, and by threat 6, you're like, oh, okay. I'm gonna need a lot of counter spells here. And we did some testing, Jack, before you went off to the event, and wow, does that matchup feel bad from, you know, if this deck can beat the counter spell combo deck, it must have a great feel to play and actually quite a powerful position in the metagame, especially for you to both do so well in the event. So just before we move on to the actual deck tech and talking through cards, first of all, guys, congratulations. Fantastic results. I saw Jack play on stream. I saw George walking around at the back of stream in between games and just seeing the shirts on as luminescent, let's say, but it's really nice to see you guys out there representing. Didn't see Dan at all though. Dan, what were you doing?
I was crying in my car mostly in between rounds. That's what I was doing.
Okay, fair enough. And again, we have included, or the guy, I say we, the royal we, the guys are to attach a Sideboard guide to this. So if you really want to give this deck a go, please check that out. I never used to like Sideboard guides until I realized I sideboarded horrifically. And then you know, sideboarding's a really big part of Magic, so we're going to make sure that's in there if you want to give this a go in a challenge or any other events coming up.
For what it's worth, I'm a massive advocate of a sideboard guide.
Yeah.
And the best example and the best use I've had for one was for the RC in Prague. I wrote a full sideboard guide for Boros Energy in the week building up to it. And over the entire event, I looked at it every single round, and I ignored it every single round. But it saved so much brain power because I had a starting point, and then I just fine-tuned it on the spot. I didn't need to think through the full, what are the obvious ins and outs. It was just already there, and then I just go, actually, I'd like one more of these, one less of these. And it saves so much brain power in a big event. That's massive.
Oh, yeah. I don't think that... I think that, like, as well, if you're new to Modern, I think this is a very enticing deck. It does fun things. It cheats large creatures into play. You can't get more fun than that. But if you're coming from another format, Sideboarding just works differently in every format is one thing I've discovered as well. Standard sideboarding is different to modern sideboarding, so it's nice to have a little guide if you're using this as a transfer into the format. So, yep, sideboard guides included. Dan, anything you want to cover or go over, or should we just get into the meat and potatoes of this deck?
Let's get into the pie.
Yep. So, I love that. That was actually in sync. Look at us. We're podcasting, Dan.
We're in sync. I like it.
Yeah. So instead of actual meat, we have very large creatures to cheat into play. George, do you want to talk us through these threats and why they're so impactful, and just maybe some insights if you have them?
Yeah, of course. So it sort of splits into two camps, really, and that is your plan A and your plan B to a point. Plan A being the big PV potatoes, and they are Abhorrent Oculus and Archon of Cruelty. It's a bit of a finger and thumb situation in that you can persist both of them, but you can only unearth the Oculus. But our main plan A is to persist that Archon of Cruelty into play. It is by far the best non-legendary animate target that we have in Modern. Yep. It is removal, card draw, card advantage, and a clock in a single package. And then we've got the eye. The eye allows us to sort of two strain, so we can either unearth or persist. Either are as good as the other. And not only do you get a chunky flyer, but you also get a wide board that also fuels your graveyard for future reanimates. Or if your big threat does get removed, it then sets you up for the next reanimate spell or the next Emperor of Bones, which is part of our plan B. Yep. So yes, the dream might well be to pitch a fatty into the graveyard and reanimate it, but sometimes you've got to do it the backwards way, and that Emperor of Bones is a scary, scary card for that exact reason. So unlike a lot of Goyo's decks, so the premier, or was the premier reanimate deck in the format, there was a haste effect, layer effect given to the creature that's reanimated. Emperor of Bones gives us that ability on the Archon, which not only has an enter the battlefield ability, but that attack trigger as well. So Emperor of Bones is really, really scary in this deck. And then you have Psychic Frog. So as somebody who played back in as far back as Odyssey, having Psychotog and Shadow Mage Infiltrator stapled together in one card that's a discard outlet, a clock, and a card draw engine is phenomenal. And it fits this deck absolutely perfectly. It is, I mean, we say it's plan B, Jack, but I think you would agree with me that it's, for the most part, it's plan A. If anything, it's plan S.
It's an interesting thing you can have with the deck's play pattern of like your ideal turn 2 is Frog, not like a persist or anything, because you sort of wrestle over that, and then your aftermath is, now that we've fought over this, now I'll persist this Archon. It's disgusting.
Yeah, and the flexibility is fantastic. Like, you have this premium 2-drop threat, but depending on the matchup, you can either flip into the I need to get my opponent dead quick. Amulet comes to mind, for example, or the fast combo decks, or you can just play this premium A-grade threat on turn 2 and still be in the same awesome position turn 3, whether it's in play or not.
Yeah,
this
I love
deck's
it.
just full of scary creatures like Oculus, Archon, Bones, and Psychic Frog. They're all insane just on their own. And like, worst case scenario, if you don't have any of your creatures in a bin, you could just steal your opponent's creatures with the Emperor Bones, or play out the Frog and it blocks really well, and also just attacks through everything. Deck looks scary.
And shout out to Troll of Khazad-dûm. It's a one-of. It's our 19th land, but like Dan mentioned, it is, it's good enough to get banned in Legacy. So it's got to be good here.
3 different games in the tournament. Absolute monster.
So banned in Modern as well, right?
Oh,
not yet.
Okay,
matter of time.
We'll give it some. It is only a matter of time. I think that like one thing that with decks like this is, on the surface they look linear, and the moment you start to peel away those layers, there's actually loads of micro synergies going on. And then even just the description of Emperor Bones into Archon of Cruelty sounds very reminiscent or similar to Flage Arena of Glory. It's the ability to, it just closes a game, shuts that door very confidently. And let's say it goes wrong. The difference between that is Archon of Cruelty has my favorite text on it, which is draw card. So even if there's some interaction there, yeah, that's pretty disgusting. I don't like that Oculus gets you more, it fuels the bin, but then it puts Emperor of Bones face down for like cheeky Reanimator shenanigans there, and then just Oculus finding more Oculus is just all disgusting.
One of the real slept on things as well with this is Bailmerk is massive in the format, so you don't even need to fill your own bin for Emperor of Bones to be scary. You just let your opponent play a Bailmerk, and now you've got a Solitude under your Emperor. Like you can really just bully your opponent with their own cards.
Yeah, and like even if you're against something like Brood Scale, they play Malevolent Room, interact there a little bit, maybe nick a cheeky Fortnite Seer, or like when we tested, you stole the Thunder Trap Trainer, then used it to find like an interaction spell. That felt pretty gross. No, I think Emperor Bones is like, during spoiler season, a lot of people went, that looks cool, and quickly moved on. But as the format's developed, I think he's one of the secret best cards in the format. And at this point, it might not even be much of a secret.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, I think he's one of those guys that really benefits from the format being in the place it is at the moment, where there's a lot of, no hard graveyard hate. There's a lot of people sort of incidentally throwing just cards in the graveyard, and he thrives in that environment.
Yeah, definitely. I think that it's so clean too, right, this list?
Yeah.
Oh, it's one of those decks that is like largely sort of built itself, because you've got, X lands, X threats that you don't actually have a lot of sort of choice between, because these ones are all so synergistic. And then you've got the other sort of few spells that are just, actually chuck stuff in the bin and reanimate stuff. You've actually only got a very small set of cards that you're looking at for that sort of flex slot, if you will.
We were saying before, like, this list it's not new. Like, it's really not. Like, it's been around for a fair few months now, and it is super tight. So you'll notice things like, well, Jack will go over it in a second. But the flex slots are minimal. There's two essentially in the whole list, and it that actually, if anything, gives credit to just how well the deck performs, despite how tight it is. So, Jack will cover those flex slots.
Yeah, for sure.
I sorry, Sam. I didn't even notice that this deck was like, it's been around for a while. Like the oldest card in it is like Abhorrent Oculus, which was printed in
Dustmore.
Dustmore, that's the one. Thank you.
Dustmore.
Wow. I mean, there was a player in my LGS in Wigan. They were on sort of a similar list to this way back in the RC at the start of the year. But it's been around, but like I said, we're like the meta adjusts, and it just so happens to be that not a lot of people are playing Graveyard Hate. So it's just fallen into the hands of the boys.
Yeah, like even Graveyard Hate in Modern though is either one shot effect or one at a time. We're actually very low on cards like Rest in Peace or Leyline of the Void. They just aren't as prominent as used to be. Like, if you're a Reanimator deck, you can play around an Emperor of Bones on their side. You can play around the one shot Tormod's Crypt or Soul Guide Lantern or like anything like that. But the actual factual hard nobody gets a graveyard card just haven't been that good, because they don't actually impact the board, and Modern's all about impacting the board at the moment. Talking about new cards, it's kind of ironic that the newest cards you guys have the ability to play is Faithless Looting. That's almost one of the newer cards ish unbanned at that point. Jack, other than these, obviously we saw, Psychic Frogs and Enabler. Talk me through these instants and sorceries, or the removal and interaction. How's Faithless Looting been here?
Faithless Looting is an absolute monster, because your instants and sorceries, again, you're quite set, right? You're playing 4 Persist, 4 Unearth as your sort of reanimation package.
Yep.
You've got your 4 Faithless Looting and your 4 Thought Scours as you'll just put stuff in the bin so I can reanimate it. And that just feeds into your creature plan of, you can unearth most of your threats, you can persist all of your threats, and they all work. Like in the number of times over this weekend, I was persisting a Psychic Frog, so I have a 0-1 Psychic Frog was, crazy, but you do it. And then your last slots are then filled with your interaction, right? Modern at the moment is super interactive, and you just cannot get away with having nothing. And as this deck has access to black, you are just playing the suite of 4 Thoughtseize, 4 Fatal Push, because that deals with most decks in the format, right? Depending on your matchup, if you get the correct one of those, you can swing it massively in those early turns. And then this comes onto that sort of first flex slot in the deck, is you then have room for like one more interaction piece. And online, people have been playing loads of different ones, Inquisition of Kozilek, Spell Pierce, all sorts of stuff. I lent on Spell Pierce for this, George lent on Spell Pierce for this, and, it's one of those cards that is fantastic as, like, that first time you see it, and it's a bit monster all weekend for me.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to say. Well, that's a lie, I do. This is a fantastic 40s deck, right? Like, I know that it feels silly to say, but it's like, talk me through how good 40s is here, Jack.
So in the format at the moment, you've sort of got, with regards to this deck, you've got 2 sorts of matchups. You've either got ones where you care what they do, or ones where you don't really care what they're doing, So, for example, like your fast combo decks, you're not expecting them to interact with you, so you use Thoughtseize then to just buy you time to murder them. And then you've got the other half of the format where they're desperately trying to interact with you, whether it's Counterspell or Solitude, and just taking away that one piece of interaction into then your Archon, which then rips their hand further apart. It's really hard to recover from those sorts of things, but it just allows you to force through your own, plan A really cleanly.
Yeah, and even post-board, right, if they're trying to mulligan for that graveyard hate, you just get to then strip them from really win on a resource battle before even really any threats have been played. I think that
out as well, like Persist weirdly is one of your best interaction pieces, because when you do Persist and Archon, it is a kill spell and a discard spell.
Yeah,
sure, and sounds disgusting to put it bluntly. Sounds really awkward. I love the one-off Spell Pierce. I think that that's just a general respect to the power of Modern. You don't really know we're going to see in these events. Spell Pierce can save an Archon from a Shoot the Sheriff, or it can counter a Neoform. Neoform from losing you the game. I really like the utility of Spell Pierce. This is also a great Spell Pierce deck. It's like almost quite tempo-y in its own way with the frogs and the emperors and the Oculus. I also think that Fort Scour, I think that at some point in time, every member of Chad Magic has registered Fort Scour in their 75. I know I used to play it a lot. I used to play Grixis Delver into Grixis Death Shadow in Modern. And I think that this card actually lost a lot of momentum as the cards around it got better, because you've all had the rubbish Fort Scour. You need a land, you mill 2 lands, and you 7-drop instead, right? But
the first 3 rounds of this event were made for me and George by Fort Scour. Like, I had a monstrous start because Fort Scour was hitting nothing but Archons and, Oculuses.
Yeah.
Coming close, people, because Thought Scour is the worst card in this deck. I hate it. Yeah, let's just say this weekend I wished it was considered not Thought Scour, but it does fill a role. And like you said, I'm pretty sure every single one of the team has registered it, and it is terrible. But it is just needed. It is just needed. Sometimes you do just need 3 cards in the bin for to hard cast an Oculus, and unfortunately, it's just occupational. But there's nothing worse than playing against a combo matchup and you Thought Scouring 2 copies of Thought Skis off the top and then drawing the Archon. That was the exact sequence, that turn.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was horrible.
Horrible.
I think, speaking between rounds, I must have spoken to you a couple of times, and you were like, "Mate, I hate Fort Scour so much. I just want to take it off the deck now." I was like, "Oh, poor George."
I think one of the highlights of the tournament, I think for me, was I was chatting with Will Hall between rounds and saying, like, I am running stupidly hot today. Thought Scour has been nothing but misses. And I got paired into him, feature match area round 5, and after the game finished, he was like, "Yeah, you were not kidding with how hot you're running. Like, this is."
Yeah, I am. I was out. I was playing some partner duties. We were out shopping, and I was just like glued to my phone in a shop. And the moment I loved is like there was Will. It's not a good matchup ish, I guess. Will was on Esper Blink with solitudes and stuff. Well, I guess we'll get onto that in a little bit. But I just remember Will being sat there with a Relic of Progenitus, and there was it was in your upkeep, and I could see it on his face. It was like, do I play around Oculus or do I play around Archon?
Faithless looting.
Yeah, that's what it was. And he chose to play around an Archon. No, sorry, an Oculus. And then,
which, to be fair, was the right play. In my graveyard, there was like 2 Persist, 2 Unearth, 2 Archon.
Yeah.
So he's like, it's unlikely that that's going to happen. So let's play around Oculus.
What happened?
He exiled the graveyard, so then Faithless resolves. I discard Archon land, persist the Archon, win the game.
Yeah, I saw. I was about 4 hours away. I felt that eye roll as if I was right there. It was fantastic.
Powerful.
And obviously, Will was a great sport. This sort of stuff. It was good to watch. It was good to watch. And you just had such a cheeky little grin on the other side of the table. It's fantastic.
We've been talking all day about how hot I was running, and then that happened. He was like, "Oh, of course."
Oh, there we go. There we go. Yeah. On stream, perfect. But yeah, I think George, you made my point. I don't think Fortescue is necessarily the best modern card, but I think Oculus has really brought this card back into the competition. In hindsight, and this is just if people are going to be home, is the right card to play Consider, or is it still Fortescue?
I think it is still Fortescue. I mean, ironically, if you look at the shell of the deck and you compare it to the Frogulus list, the blue-black Unearthed Frogtide decks that were running sort of January, February this year, it's 60-70% the same list. And unfortunately, we had to play Fortescue there to fuel the Oculus or that high roll game, and that's exactly Jack being Exhibit A through Z and a couple of times over at the weekend. It's exactly proof of that concept. So it's definitely worth testing Consider without a shadow of a doubt. But I think for velocity's sake, Fortescue is the better option for going forward.
Yeah, I
agree.
I think that's really fair. Yeah. Here's a hot one that you could play. Would you play Shadow of a Doubt in this 75?
Great room. I'm playing my 1 spell pierce in that slot.
Okay, fair enough.
Like we spent far too long discussing like the one-off slots in the main and sideboard to ever drop poor spell pierce at this rate.
Yeah. So other than spell pierce, then what else was in contention for that cheeky one-off?
So the other one we talked about,
so we had quite a few
online do, was Unearth.
Right.
Yeah, and we had cards like Inquisition of Kozilek, like Jack mentioned. Spell Snare had popped up in a few lists here and there. Some people were playing the 19th land. It was a bit wild, for literally the sake of one slot. And the same went for the sideboard as well. It was nitpicky individual card choices that came down to. We played 74 of the same 75 between me and Jack, and it came down to basically personal preference. So, but I think Spell Pierce is right in that main deck slot without a doubt.
Yeah. It looks right, and I think that the fact that you both had a great weekend obviously isn't down to Spell Pierce, but I imagine it really flexed when it needed to flex, because Modern, a lot of the decks just operate off so few lands as well. Even your combo deck, obviously combo decks do, but even the more control-y decks are trying to it's more that there's one spell played and then the rest of the interaction is free. So being able to interact with the free spells when they're tapped out, I imagine, is a really big deal.
Yeah, it's very slim.
So one of the decks that is rarely dragged into the late game. Most of your games, you and your opponent are both set out like 3-4 lands the whole game.
Yeah. Like you don't see your Cryptic Command control anymore. We're running like
you're not hard casting an Archon.
You're not hard casting an Archon,
Oh, are you flipping Archons?
Somebody did do it on somebody did do it on stream, actually. Funnily enough, play against Will. Yeah, the lad he played in round 2 or 3, I think. The lad he played before he played Leo Lu, the winner. He was on Grixis Reanimator and hardcast an Archon on stream. Bless him.
And lost.
Oh yeah, and he lost.
Oh,
Yeah.
He lost,
brutal. There's a winner in my heart, George. Winner in my heart.
Oh yeah, that's a tick in the bucket list for Grixis Reanimator right there.
Yeah, I want to see the attack with my Manifest Dread. Okay, I'll block, flip Archon. I've missed out on the attack trigger, but this is this is a true flex here. So lands seems pretty straightforward to me. Anything you guys want to discuss with the lands, or just as it should be?
Mana base is rock solid. I didn't have an issue with it all weekend.
Looks very good.
Okay, so before we get to the sideboard, Dan, I think what would be best to do is go through what you want to see and what you don't want to see. Shuffling up for your next Mega Modern. You've picked Grixis Reanimator because, you know, George and Jack are great salesmen. I'm sold. But let's say your opponent starts with X. What do you really want to see and what do you not want to see?
So for me personally, the first card I want to see into a blind matchup is Thoughtseize. It is everything we want to see in terms of interaction, whether it's combo deck, maybe not so much against the energy decks in the format, but into a blind matchup, it is the best card we want to see. Because the fail rate is we can always Thoughtseize ourselves if we don't have one of our other enabler cards, so Faith Looting or Frog, for example. We ideally want a threat, whether it is something we can reanimate or it's a turn 2 threat like Emperor or Frog, and then a piece of interaction. If we can get a cantrip in there, if we can get a looting or a Thought Scour to go on top of the reanimate spell, then brilliant. And this deck can operate, like you guys said, on very, very few lands. I had my round, I think it was my round 4. I had a game winning on a single land, Thought Seizing myself, and then unearthing an Oculus on turn 2. That carried me to the win. So yeah, that would be my ideal start. I don't know if Jack's got any other thoughts on that.
The deck mulligans fantastically and aggressively. And I had all weekend, you get these sort of, especially game 1, you get this hand that's like Frog, Fatal Push, some lands, and you're like, all weekend I was thinking, I am not this mid-range deck. I'm in this away. I'm getting aggressive. Where's my Faithless Looting? Where's my Persist?
Interesting. So if you saw fairer hands, if I give this a go, a fair hand's just not what I want to keep here.
It really depends, right, on matchups and what knowledge you've got of your opponent's deck. Because if you're on the blind, it can be harder to make that sort of a call. But like, I have a real philosophy of like a deck like this. Game 1 should be yours because your opponent has no idea what they're expecting, right? So if they're keeping a hand of like Fatal Pushes and like this sort of cheap interaction to fight you, and you're just going Faithless Archon, that breaks a lot of these sort of unknown hands.
Yeah.
So game 1, I want to be explosive out the gates so I can just really get on the front foot early. It worked really well in a load of matchups. You can get it wrong. For the most part, I think a deck like this, your plan should be smash game 1 because you are unfair and require very specific cards to stop you. And then games 2 and 3 start to play a bit fairer when they're being really overprotective of how they're going to fight you.
The other thing I will say, having mulliganed a lot with this deck on Saturday, ironically, the more you mulligan, the also more aggressive your draws become. Because those aggressive starts are so focused on A plus B, they are itch a fat in reanimate. The closer you are to the lower number of cards, the higher the sort of likelihood or the hands you tend to keep are for that plan A, for that reanimate. And that ends up, I think I won the majority of the games I'd mulliganed because of that fact. Because you are forced into those aggressive lines to make sure you can keep pace in that game.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
So
yeah, I like that.
One of my favourite things with Moxfield, which I don't think we've done on an episode before, is that you can actually do sort of test hands. So we've got one already down here. So we've got Scalding Tarn, Unearth, Emperor Bone, Spell Pace, the one-off, Thought Scour, Oculus, and Frog. to me, this hand seems to be a keep, because you got the one land, so you can go get say like your water grave for the fort scour, or just a surveil land to then hopefully get your frog out to then unearth your Oculus, go from there. Lads, how do you feel about this hand?
This hand has something that came up a couple times over the weekend, that this deck can really abuse one-landers.
Yeah.
Because if I just play it slow, surveil, don't draw my land, I don't need to force my Thought Scour. I can discard my Oculus to hand size, next turn, untap, unearth my Oculus.
Yeah. So
this deck, like, you're not, especially because you've got the unearth there, I know even if I miss my land drop, turn 3, I have an Oculus on board. Then if I find, an extra land by then, I've then got Oculus unearthed with a Spell Piercer.
Yeah. Okay, I like that.
Yeah, absolutely agree there. Plus, you also have the backup plan of Frog. So if you do happen to draw a second land, then you have our premium threat and our discard outlet for the unearthed turn, which may will be on turn 3 in this case.
Yeah.
I just mill over. So I choose to be on the draw. I draw second land, mill over Archon with my Fort Scour, and then draw Persist off the Fort Scour as well. I think that's the right play. But yeah. I think
that sounds like a Jack line. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's strange because everything in my body is screaming not to keep this, but I've got two guys experienced with Deco, and actually this is good. This is good. How many?
When you look at this deck, like your best explosive hands are sort of discard outlet and way to reanimate. And this hand unconventionally has discard outlet by simply not playing land 2 on turn 2.
Yeah.
And then you have the unearth that you can cut. Like, this has all of the components you need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like looking at it like that, especially if it's like a resource plan. Your resources are in hand here. We're in the draw here, right? Dan, draw us a card. Let's see the next one.
Troll. So there's land number 2.
Perfect.
There we go. Yeah, perfect.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. What a keep. Yeah, I've got nothing else to say there. That's pretty cool. Thanks for showing Mock. I didn't know it could do that.
Well, everything's got little hidden features. I like Moxfield. Like, to be fair, like, we've done however many deck techs now, and I've seen that feature. Well, I see play test up in the top left all the time, and I'm like, what happens if I click that button? And then I clicked it once, and it took me into just like a goldfish. I was like, oh, this is fun. And I spent all night goldfish and mono red. Yeah,
I could have guessed that's how you spend your free time.
Yeah, even though I've got it on like Arena and Magic Online, I've just chose not to play against anyone instead.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on from Dan's hobbies, let's cover the sideboard. Jack, this was your 75, correct?
This is my 75, yeah. So me and George played one card different. I'll quickly run through my sideboard and we can chat about sort of different talking points we had.
Please.
Because there's a number of sideboard slots we sort of agreed you can't play Modern without. For example, 4 consigned to memory.
Yep.
It's really hard to not turn up with them. We also brought Harbinger of the Seas. We thought there was going to be Amulet. We refused to not respect Amulet, so just bring the Harbinger because that's the one way you can really cleanly get a leg up on them.
Yep.
We then played a split of Wraths in the board to respect Boros Energy and some other matchups. So we play 1 Pyroclasm and 1 Harvester of Misery. Harvester doubling up as either spot removal or you can persist it into a board wipe.
Yep.
So really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
We then got 2 Meltdown, or I had 2 Meltdown for your random affinity piles. There's a lot of work there, especially with the new warp cards playing about in that deck. They can really go wide quickly. It's nice just having a 2-3 mana answer to them. 2 Spell Bombs, again, it's just a catch-all for a format. This deck is on the rise. Gorio's is floating about. Living End's floating about. You've got some more control-y piles with like Flage and things. It's nice just to have this option available to you. And then an Into the Floodmaw, which is just a very nice, this answers any potential shenanigan we come into. So, if someone's suddenly pulling out Leyline of the Void, we very technically have a way to fight it.
Yep.
And then lastly was the silver bullet we brought for the weekend was Torpor Orb. which is one we hadn't seen online. But, I tested a load against Esper Blink, and a lot of people online seem to like the matchup. I really didn't like the matchup. And me and George sat chatting about it for ages and sort of came to the conclusion that Torpor Orb is stupidly strong against them. Because it hurts you a little bit, right? Your Archon of Cruelty no longer has that powerful enter the battlefield effect. The flip side is your opponent's Solitude is now a 3/2 that does nothing.
Yep.
And you just win that game.
Yeah. The only way they have to beat a Torpor Orb is to attack with a failure, typically.
Or Prismatic Ending.
Prismatic Ending, okay. Which I don't think they're relying on their sorcery speed removal.
It gets really hard because very quickly it becomes they have to deal with the Torpor Orb and have the cards immediately in hand to deal with the Archon. Because if they can't deal with it then and there, the Archon swings and you're discarding a card, sacking a creature, your opponent's draw, you quickly spiral, even if in a turn or so you could deal with the Archon. You've drawn 2 cards, played a couple other threats you've not had time to look at, it gets out of hand quickly.
Seems solid. So if Torpor Orb's not stock for the sideboard, what was cut?
Most people are playing 2 Mystical Disputes for your various blue decks in the format, whether it's Belcher or the sort of Murktide piles.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Did you play against much Esper Blink over the weekend?
I played it 3 times. I beat it 3 times. Every game I drew Torpor Orb by 1.
What about yourself, George?
I didn't play against Blink, but we had a long discussion about flexibility, and I did play against Goyos, and that Torpor Orb does a serious job against Goyos. It cuts down their enablers, and same as Blink's, Atraxa and Solitude as well. So curving Thoughtseize to take your interaction into Torpor Orb, into Harbinger of the Seas was lights out for Goyos.
Yeah, that's actually the 1-2 punch there, isn't it? That's really brutal, because their typical answer to Harbinger is just a Solitude. Nice. Yeah, I like that a lot. So if this is your sideboard, Jack, George, what was the one difference you went?
So the only difference for me was dropping the second copy of Meltdown and playing a single copy of Engineered Explosives, which is an old favourite of mine. This was, again, like Jack said, it was a different Wrath effect just to cover all bases. The energy matchup was one consideration, as it hits Bombardment, Flip to Jarnies, Voice of Victories, and similar bits. There was a little bit of an uptick in blue-white energy blink piles running around. We were talking earlier about the type of graveyard hate that was getting played, and for the most part, people are playing things like Ghost Vacuum, Thraben Charm, Skullguide Lantern, Mod Crypt, because Flage is in the format. But take Flage away, and then obviously these white decks have access to Rest in Peace and similar again. So that was my consideration, and it paid off, to be fair. The one match against Energy that I had in round 1, in game 2, I wrathed a Bombardment, a Voice, and a Flip to Jarny with an EE. So nice tick in my deck building box for me. But just a different Wrath effect just to cover that base.
Pretty disgusting. And honestly, it's not as if one person's playing. I can't even think of card examples. Well, it's not like one person's playing an extra removal slot there and the other's playing a graveyard piece. It's actually just 2 varieties of cards that kind of don't do the same thing. So that's I'm happy to call that 775. Dan, do you want to cheat and call the same 75?
I think we can, yeah.
Nice.
I think an interesting thing is I can sort of see how we both got there, because I did a huge amount of sort of Modo testing in the build-up, and the Affinity deck is massive on Modo, so I played against that deck 10 times in the week building up to it.
Yeah.
So I had a huge amount of respect for that deck, so I really wanted those 2 Meltdowns, because I know that deck can be tricky, whereas George doesn't play as much Modo, and obviously the Affinity deck, you tend to see it a lot less in paper.
Yeah.
So, that same sort of level of respect wasn't, there, which is... In the end, George was right. There was no affinity in the room, and I could have done with an EE. It's an interesting, our different testing ways, led to that slight difference of opinion. I
mean, credit to Jack. My testing is Jack testing for me. So thanks, Jack. But no, brain is always in paper first. So yeah, that was a nice little tweak for me. But regardless, it worked out well for both of us. So
Yeah.
zero complaints here.
Yeah, I like it. Again, the sideboard is actually very. I think that there's a large amount of nonsense on a model. Covers it quite well. Yeah, I like it.
What I discovered with this deck is because I initially thought this was going to be a deck where you are just like in a sort of combo pile of decks where you're doing your unfair thing and just trying to bully your opponent. And then when you compare yourself to the other combo decks, I thought we'd be the sort of slower one of the lot. And then, so I thought we'd have a lot of bad combo matches. Quite quickly found out, it turns out if you thought seize someone and then make an Archon, you're very much the quick combo deck.
Yeah.
Which I completely hadn't thought of when I built this deck. You're actually like, in that matchup, you're a tempo deck. So it's quite a funny one that like in those sorts of matchups, I feel like the unfair deck rather than them.
Yeah, a lot. Unless you're playing against Neoform in Modern at the moment, the combo decks are actually quite slow. They're not trying to kill you on turn 2 or turn 3. Storm's fallen off a little bit, although some argue it should never have been on altogether. And when I say some people, I mean me. But like the actual combo decks, like your Belcher, which had a respectable weekend. I saw some people doing well with it. Belcher's killing you in turn 5, 7. It actually wants to see the opposite end of Modern. It wants to run you out of resources, then pull the cannon trigger, rather than a Reanimator deck that's like just excited to get out the deck out the gate. No, that's and again
Also
we've go on, sorry.
It's funny you call out those two decks. My round 7 opponent was Storm. My round 8 opponent was Belcher.
Nice. And not only Belcher, right? It was Sean Goddard, friend of the podcast, on Belcher. How did that go for you?
Final boss for your top 8.
That is a final boss and a half, actually.
Yeah.
That's a really good one. And you got there, right?
Got there in the end. 7-1, baby.
Yeah, and I'm gonna take credit for that because we tested Belcher the night before. So
it's interesting with testing because probably worth talking about, right? I played a huge amount of energy in some other decks. I've not really played a sort of tempo-y deck in a while. Last one you could probably say would be like Team of Rhinos during its heyday.
Mm-hmm.
So playing this, I've not played this sort of deck in a while. So I spent a bunch of leagues where I did not do well. I was putting out 1-4s, 2-3 sort of thing, just getting the play patterns of the deck down and working out its rhythms. Before I finally had my last sort of leagues, I felt like I was in gear. And then, I messaged a load of the team going, right, I think I've got my rough grip with this deck. I want to just drill this matchup, and I want to drill this matchup. And those two matchups were Esper and Blue Belcher.
And undefeated on the day against those piles, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's come up quite a bit. And sorry, that's actually quite fitting for George's because I think Sean's local for you. Ish, used to be
ish, yeah. Obviously, he's a little bit big time for us in here, Cambridgeshire, but yeah, he does rock up down at Saffron Walden every so often.
Yeah, that's fair. So we've mentioned the supposed new boogeyman in the format, Esper Blink. Quantum Riddler has been quite the impactful card, and by that I mean very, very good. Yeah, very good. So. Some people like the matchup. Some people don't like the matchup. You might not like the matchup, but you had 100% win rate against it. And I think that even though you dodged it, George, I think it would have been the same for yourself as you were both prepared for it. And it was actually very popular, right? Was it the most popular deck in the room or close to it?
It certainly looked like it.
Yeah. Just walking around, you're seeing like black-white Blink. You're seeing a lot of Esper Blink. There was a lot of it in the room.
Yeah,
I think combined it probably was overall.
Yeah.
Looking around the room.
Yeah, and did it convert well to top 8, or was it knocked out pretty quickly in the early rounds?
I can't see.
No,
I've actually got it here. 2 seconds. I think. Obviously, Grixis Reanimator was the number 1 archetype in the top 8. We're just going to put that out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was one. It was Dave Morton, I think, the lad who finished in 6th in Swiss, was on it.
That's fair. I saw it. I know Will was on Esper Blink, right? And they made the chocolate top 8. But yeah, I think that it definitely feels a little bit like Prowess did, in my opinion. A bit of this deck has legs, and then everybody gives it a go, and then some people stick with it, some people come away from it. How is this deck in a modern format where Esper Blink becomes the best strategy, and how is this deck in the format where Esper Blink actually falls off quite a bit? What do those two futures of modern look like for a deck like this?
I mean, we've seen it before with flash in the pan decks. They either are inherently a glass cannon, they fall off on their own, or it's meta dependent. We don't really have. I mean, we've got Spider-Man coming out in the next sort of couple of weeks before the next Axion, and to be honest, I don't see the meta changing. I think Blink is here to stay, and looking at the numbers online and looking at how good it looked, I was impressed with how good it looked. I think the Esper build is definitely here to stay. It needed that card draw engine that wasn't a potential chink in the armor, like Ketramos was, and Riddler plus Frog, or it's some combination of those two. Just have put it over the edge. And credit to Will, he made it look very, very good on stream. I hadn't watched all that much of it live, and it does look like a mainstay.
And like we were saying before about the lack of sort of like permanent graveyard hate, like the lack of ley lines, rest in peace. You know, it's a white deck, so it can just splash into like one, maybe two copies of rest in peace on the board if the Esper Blink players are having a more of a harder time playing against the Grixis Reanimator deck or playing against Oreos. And there's sort of like I think we mentioned it sort of like off podcast before. Like the more you see these Reanimator decks creep up, the more graveyard hate you tend to see. And then that's where this deck would then come down, and then the graveyard hit will come back down, and then it's just an endless cycle of going round and round and round.
Yeah, somewhat reminiscent of the old Affinity loop we saw before Modern Horizons, right? Yeah, you know, Affinity sees play, Stony Silence time, and then nobody plays Affinity, so Stony Silence drops back out, and then we're stuck in that perpetual loop. I think this is a cool deck to exist.
I think an interesting thing with this deck. I think an interesting thing with this deck that like I hadn't really considered till I started playing it. The way the format at the moment is built, not many decks are ready to go on this hard graveyard hate. Like if you look at like Boros Energy, they use their graveyard, so they don't want to go rest in peace. If you look at Esper Blink, they use their graveyard, they don't want to go on this hard thing. But there's not a lot of decks that are primed to do it. Like even if you look like Amulet Titan, they use their graveyard. Like so much of the format is dabbling in their own graveyard. They don't want to commit to this hard graveyard hate. So I think this deck actually has legs because of the shape of all these other decks in the format and the way they're built.
Even the like quote unquote fair decks, like the Eldrazi decks, they are still trying to ramp out to Emrakul. Brood-Scale uses the graveyard for Delirium, for Traversial Mold, and Emrakul. So every, Jack smashed it with that. Every single deck has some sort of aspect of graveyard as a resource. There's very, very few that I can think of outside of, even Prowess for the Delirium side of things, and Lava Dart. Every single deck has got some sort of aspect to it that needs the graveyard. So I think this deck has legs, and the results and the challenges have certainly shown that it's got longevity just beyond Alley's run in the showcase the other week.
Yeah, and I've actually just pulled up the modern metagame. Top 10 decks all interact with the graveyard in some way. The 11th deck on there, I think the first deck that doesn't is Eldrazi-Tron, because that doesn't ramp. That's probably, but there's probably something in. Like Cityscape Reveler has Unearth or something, so maybe it does technically use the bin. But 10 decks of the format all trying to use the graveyard as a sub piece. That actually gives Azori's Control potential to come in, play some of those, maybe do well in the format.
The Ephemerate list has started to pop up. Just using Quantum Riddler rather than Baelmerk, so it doesn't have that leverage on the graveyard.
Yeah. Well, the graveyard's actually just been. It's almost like there's been a mutual agreement between players. We won't play any true graveyard hate, and we all get to use a graveyard. It's the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
No one's, fully abusing it, so we're all okay using it. And then this deck slides in and goes, if we're okay with using it, let's go.
Yeah, this is
look, Ma, no hands. Let's go.
yeah. This is the equivalent of like a house party, and somebody turns the music up just a bit too loud. Like everyone's having a good time, and then somebody, I love this song, dial it up to 10, and the song's actually a 6/6 flyer that makes you sacrifice a creature on enter. And anyway, analogy doesn't work. Just before we wrap up the pod, I think we've got fantastic insight. I've actually really enjoyed having both of you on to see more of that process. One thing I just want to touch on is let's remove Grixis Reanimator from this equation, because to be frank, you guys called the metagame and it went really well for both of you. Do you have any tips or tricks for people at home who potentially want to try and navigate the metagame and play someone maybe a bit rogue? Like, George, what advice would you give on that?
Jam living end. No, I'm joking. No, personally, it's for me to steer away from one of the archetypes that I know very well. It takes a lot. I've done it before to good and bad effect. The one thing I would say is just, even if you've just got one or two mates that play the game, just drop them a message and just get an outside opinion. Have a look and see what you can sort of ascertain from the current meta. Make use of MTG top 8, make use of MTG decks. But ask around. I credit to the Chad team and the sort of wider testing group that we link in with. I do rely on their nous on Modo and what they're seeing online. So just having that outside opinion is really important. And if you then do think about going for a rogue deck like Grixis Reanimator sort of was this time last week, having that backing just to really nail it down and get the testing in, and those last little tweaks is really important. So as somebody who's played a lot of rogue decks over the years, that is the number one thing I could recommend.
I think an interesting one as well is, like, in the build up to this, I was testing this deck for like a week or so, and I asked a number of guys on the team, if you were going, what would you play? Blah, blah, blah. Every single one of them said a deck that was not Grixis. And I asked them, do you think Grixis is a good choice? Most people were saying no. Which is an interesting, I look to these guys, for their opinions and stuff. But sometimes you do just got to trust yourself. And, if you find yourself really, infatuated with someone, don't be afraid to give it that run out. And, if you bomb, have a look at why. Because, sometimes you can bomb with a deck and it still have been the correct choice. And sometimes you can do really well with a deck and it have been the wrong choice, but you can just line up well. And this was one of those decks, it really had piqued my interest. So I was asking the team their opinions on it, and everyone was saying, if it was me, I would play this other deck. And in the end, I started asking them, rather than that, it's like, is it a mistake to take this? And everyone quickly went, it's definitely not. And that was enough for me to go, okay, it's not everyone's first choice. They agree it is enough of a deck. You can do something with it.
Yeah.
As much as a flash in a pan deck that it is, or if there's any other decks that are out there that are seen as like flash in a pan decks, if you see in the deck put up results where top 8's one challenge and then the next day it wins the challenge again on Modo, then it's hard to argue sort of the success that people have had with that deck. You dedicate the time and the effort into that deck, then you could come away with a top 8 or a very, very solid finish. So I don't think it was necessarily a wrong pick. So yeah, congrats on your
I think
plays.
the most important thing when picking a deck, especially in a format like Modern is now, where it's so wide open, any deck can play. You've got so much room. There's no best deck. You'll struggle, like especially online, to find a deck being played more than 15% over the course of a 2-week span. So if you can come into a format like that, really understanding what the key players are, who's sort of on a rise, who's on a fall, why there's that shift, and that just gives you the best opportunity to pick a deck that may not be optimal, but angle it in a way where you are really cutting through the meta.
Yeah, and I think just to touch on one of those points, we are in a team together. We've all had decent results this year, I think, is a fair way to put it. It's been a good year for us, and the wider Chad family. But one thing I want to say that Jack's touched upon slightly and I really want to harp on is I don't go to these guys to be told yes or no. I go to them for their opinions. And sometimes you're just going to disagree, and that's absolutely fine. It would be much worse if like everyone's just like, yeah, that sounds boss. And then it goes wrong and everyone's like, wow, it looked great. So it's more about trust. If you are testing, test with people that you trust the opinion of. And even if you disagree, nobody's wrong, and you know it can work really well for you.
I mean, look at Marco, right? I think a lot of the people on the team disagreed that Green Black Midrange would beat the deck. It was on a downward trend, and then he qualified for a Pro Tour, so...
Yeah, I love that people still disagree with him about that deck choice.
Oh yeah, 100%. I think I'm one of them.
Yeah, same actually. Dan, I think that's a good place to wrap up, unless there's anything you want to add.
Yeah, no, really, really good place to wrap up. Gents, again, thank you very much for spending time with us. You know, it's midweek and it's never ideal to sit down for an hour or so and talk about Magic, so we really, really do appreciate the time.
Welcome, chaps. Thanks for having us.
No, thanks for having us.
Before we do wrap up, big, massive thank you to sponsorships of Chad Magic and Ergo battlechads, to UltraPRO. Over the weekend, we were repping these sleeves and these deck boxes. These are the Apex sleeves, and they are really, really cool. Obviously, you've got we were in the hotel the night before, and George is sleeving up his deck, and his cards are going everywhere. And I'm like, oh mate, you're gonna have to get some shuffle in. And I was doing the same. I sleeved up the deck, shuffled it, and I was sat there for like an hour, 2 hours, just watching decks on the TV in a hotel room. And then I sit down, get my deck out. It's like, perfect. No slipping, no sliding whatsoever. So the products are really, really good. I'm a big fan of them. UltraPRO, thank you again very, very much for sponsoring the team. We're very, very, very appreciative. We don't have any viewer questions this week, so if you go into the description below, the very first link is a big link, and it says brand new listener questions. If you have any questions whatsoever that you want to ask us, leave your question, leave your name, we'll answer it on the next podcast. And then the links below that is all of our social pages, so Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram, etc, etc, etc. So click on all our buttons, follow us, and like, comment, subscribe, and share. Sam, George, Jack, anything else you want to add off?
Good for me.
Brilliant. Well,
I think we'll leave it there, Dan. So if you're watching at home, thank you for tuning in, as always, and we will catch you next time.
Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.